Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 169 based on novel. So let's start. Hot underground magma space. Xiao Yan and Tianying stood here, but there was nothing except these two people. Seeing the scene in front of him, even Xiao Yan couldn't help but feel a little different. He clearly remembered that a year ago, the narwhal snake was in this space, but why is there no trace now? This is... Xiao Yan's face was full of surprise. Since the eagle brought him here, the narwhal snake must be here, but why not? Just as Xiao Yan turned his head, he saw the smile from the corners of the eagle's mouth. Haha, brother Xiao Yan, it seems that even you haven't found it. Tianying smiled and seemed quite satisfied with it. There was also a taste of complacency in his smile. Brother Tianying, what's going on? Hey. Seeing Xiao Yan frown, Tianying grinned, then raised his hands and changed the formula in his hands. After a few breaths, the magma in front of Xiao Yan and Tianying suddenly gradually became illusory until it disappeared. At the same time, a huge guy also appeared in front of them. What appeared in front of them was a huge snake, but different from ordinary snake warcraft, there was a single horn like lightning above its head. This is the narwhal snake. Is this array? It's an array, but it's a natural array. Xiao Yan frowned suspiciously, and the eagle smiled and explained. Oh, is the array still formed naturally? All things in heaven and earth, animals, flowers, and birds, Xiao Yan knows that they are raised by nature. For this magical array, Xiao Yan really can't imagine that heaven and earth can be created by themselves. Hihi, brother Xiao Yan, you don't know. Array and fighting spirit are the forces between heaven and earth, but the methods used are different, but generally speaking, they are still connected with each other. Those forces exist between heaven and earth and can be used by people because human beings can successfully arrange them, so they can be controlled. As for such arrays, they can exist because there is nothing in several historical changes, they are correctly sorted together, that's all. Hearing this, Xiao Yan realized that the world was full of all kinds of accidents. At the moment, the magical array in front of her was like the star meteorite pavilion in the fighting spirit continent. Didn't she also create the star world with the help of an extraterrestrial meteorite, and then there was the star meteorite pavilion? Having figured this out, Xiao Yan immediately nodded, then took back his thoughts and looked at the narwhal snake. After a year, from now on, the energy cuticle of narwhal snake has not changed much, but in a faint way, Xiao Yan can also feel that the smell of narwhal snake is gradually rising. From now on, his strength may have exceeded the 4-star fighting emperor. Xiao Yan's heart is also happy about it. Even though it takes a long time for narwhal snake to refine those energy cuticles, from now on, his cultivation road is at least much more stable than Xiao Yan, which makes Xiao Yan feel a little aggrieved. But immediately, Xiao Yan was relieved. It's true for all people. There are thousands of ways to get strength, but the purpose is the same. Some people's road is destined to be flat, while others' road is destined to be bumpy, but as long as you want to become strong, you must go on, no matter what the road ahead is, even if it is a sea of knife and fire, as long as you want to be strong, you must go. Even if the road of others is flat like a grassland, even in that grassland, there is not necessarily no danger. The seemingly flat grassland, perhaps the next step will be a bottomless swamp, which is not necessarily. Compared with these invisible dangers, if you look at it from another angle, perhaps the sharp mountains and fire in front of you will make you more secure. The road of the strong is hard and difficult. There is no shortcut to practice. The best way to become strong is to be down to earth and step by step. After seeing the narwhal snake, Xiao Yan's goal went straight to the hinterland of Shalin. That is the final destination of Xiao Yan's trip to Shalin Mountains. After saying goodbye to the 4 eagles, Xiao Yan set off alone and walked rapidly towards the hinterland of Shalin. A few hours later, the sunshine between heaven and earth gradually became dim. Originally, it was a green land, but it was gradually covered by ice and snow. The temperature between heaven and earth also gradually became cold. The cold wind roared and the snow danced. The whole world was filled with cold. The snow spread to the end of sight. Xiao Yan's body was unaffected in the cold wind. Gradually, behind him was also filled with a vast expanse of snow. In front of Xiao Yang, a slightly blurred mountain stood in front of him like a giant beast. Here, Xiao Yang couldn't help but have a slight pause when he walked forward. In his mind, a beautiful shadow of Miao Man couldn't help but flash out. It was Murong Qianqian. Alas, I don't know how the girl is doing now. In short, she is better than me. His fourth uncle's strength is terrible and tight. The family behind him should not be weak. For no reason, Xiao Yang said a few words in his heart. Xiao Yang took back his mind. As soon as his palm turned over, a jade card the size of his palm appeared in his hand. It was Kai Hanyu. This thing was given to him by the cold frost at the beginning. Remember to give it to him and Murong Qianqian respectively, so that they can safely enter and leave the hinterland of Shalin in the future. When Kai Hanyu was taken out, Xiao Yang's heart moved, and a wisp of fighting spirit was injected into it along the palm of his hand. Suddenly, an invisible energy mask was released from Kai Hanyu in his hand, wrapping up the space around Xiao Yang's body. The cold wind was isolated from the outside, and Xiao Yang's body felt much easier. No longer hesitated, Tianju's step at his feet was displayed in an instant. In a twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang's body had crossed the mountain in front of him and flew away quickly to the depths. Although Shalin hinterland is the hinterland, the area here is still not small. With Xiao Yang's speed, it took nearly 2 hours to find the underground ice palace where the ice was cold. After finding the entrance, Xiao Yang successfully entered the cold ice palace with the help of Kai Hanyu. At the beginning, the soul power was still weak, and Xiao Yang didn't notice it obviously, but now, when Xiao Yang first stepped into the ice palace, he clearly noticed the location of the ice soul cold spring in the ice palace. There is a lot of space in the ice palace. Last time, Xiao Yang didn't have a chance to explore because of his injury, but this time, Xiao Yang has a clear goal and points directly at the cold spring of Bingling. After entering the ice palace, the first thing you see is the courtyard buildings that look like ordinary gardens. The only difference is the materials. All the buildings here are carved from cold ice. Even if the type is single, they also have a different kind of beauty. At this time, Xiao Yang had no time to pay attention to these. After entering the ice palace, Xiao Yang quickly walked in the direction of Bingling Cold Spring. But it was not until this time that Xiao Yang suddenly found that his soul power had been limited by something since he entered the ice palace. That is to say, now he can only look for the ice spirit Cold Spring by relying on the general direction in his previous memory. Now, I'm afraid he has no other way except to touch around the ice palace. This makes Xiao Yang feel helpless. However, at the same time, Xiao Yang couldn't help being suspicious. Why didn't he see the figure of cold frost this time? It's reasonable that Hui Bodhisattva has been refined. She should have found it long ago, but why hasn't she appeared yet? With doubts in his heart, Xiao Yang continues to move forward. If he can find Bingling Cold Spring, he will take it by himself. It's a big deal to see her again in the future and give back the Bodhisattva to the woman. At the moment, Xiao Yang is full of thoughts about Bingling Cold Liquid. He doesn't have the mind to pay attention to how terrible Lung Bingfeng's strength is. The scale of the ice palace is obviously beyond Xiao Yang's imagination. From the beginning to now, he has walked around the ice palace for an hour. During this period, he has walked into a dead end many times. However, he took more turns and ate more shrivels several times. Although he has obviously felt that he is getting closer and closer to the Iceling Cold Spring, but it seemed that there was a wall between them. Xiao Yang was worried. Fortunately, Huang Tian lived up to his heart. After Xiao Yang's search for more than half a day, finally, a clear sound of running water came to his ears, which must be Bingling Cold Spring. Finally found it. Suddenly, Xiao Yang was pleasantly surprised. While carefully listening to the direction of the water sound, his steps quickly moved towards the other side, but at a certain moment, a low painful groan came from Xiao Yang's ear. Listen to that voice, the other party is obviously a woman. Her! At the moment when the moan came, Xiao Yang's body suddenly shook, his eyes turned and looked at a different hospital on his left hand. He could hear it clearly. The moan came from here. What's the matter? How can there be people here? Even if there are people, there should be only one cold and frosty woman, But what's the matter? From this voice, Xiao Yang obviously heard an extremely painful emotion. He can't imagine. At the moment, the owner of this voice must be suffering unimaginable pain. One side is Bingling Cold Spring, and the other side is a woman moaning in pain. Although Xiao Yang doesn't like to meddle, this is Cold Frost's territory after all. No matter who this person is, once the latter has an accident and Cold Frost returns, he will not easily spare him. After making a choice in his heart, Xiao Yang sighed deeply, bit his teeth hard, looked at the direction of the sound of water, and reluctantly wound into the other hospital on the left. When entering the other courtyard, Xiao Yang first asked, but then, the groans that had sounded in the room in the other courtyard the moment before were forced down. Obviously, the sudden entry of Xiao Yang, an outsider, surprised the owner of the other courtyard at the moment. The sudden disappearance of the groan also made Xiao Yang frown. Without much thought in his heart, he came forward and opened the door in the other hospital. However, immediately after that, at the moment when the door was opened, a terrible fighting spirit quickly crossed in front of Xiao Yang. I'm afraid that if the person's body was not in pain at the moment, Xiao Yang at this time might have separated for the first time. Being attacked by this terrible fighting spirit, Xiao Yang was shocked and angry. With a flash of his body, he immediately entered the door. However, when Xiao Yang looked at it, the scene in front of him made his body stay in place. At the moment, on the ice bed in the room, a beautiful figure with a delicate body and a beautiful man is curling up on the ice bed with violent trembling. The whole body becomes ice blue, just like an ice sculpture. Even through her skin, she can see the trace of bone and bone. However, what surprised Xiao Yang most was the amazing secular cheek of the beautiful shadow. Looking at its face, it was the overlord of the Shilin Mountains. Cold Frost. The overlord of Tangtang Shilin Mountain Range. At this moment, she looks as weak as a dead man. I'm afraid the blow that attacked Xiao Yang just now is her last resort. From Xiao Yang's position, we can clearly see that at this time, there are more tears dripping from the corners of the eyes of the peerless beauty. Unfortunately, at the moment of tears dripping, they have turned into ice slag and fell on the ice bed. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang couldn't help but be slightly stunned. He was even surprised. What happened? Well. Then, when Lung Bingshuang couldn't help but let out a deep groan, Xiao Yang hurried back to his mind. He hurried forward a few steps and came to Lung Bingshuang. In the latter's helpless and struggling eyes, he picked up Lung Bingshuang's cold body, and then quickly took out his clothes from Naji and spread them all on the ice bed. This just put down the delicate body of Cold Frost again. With a flick of his fingers, the gorgeous flame shot out quickly, and the temperature in the whole room immediately rose a lot. After doing this, Xiao Yang, regardless of the struggling eyes of the latter, grabbed the cold wrist with one hand and read it in his heart. The different fire in his body poured into the Cold Frost body from the palm along the meridians. At this time, a colder force in the body of the Cold Frost was like a beast, swallowing the strange fire that Xiao Yang had just integrated into his body. Well. The sudden accident made Xiao Yang burst out a dull hum, but then Xiao Yang grabbed Cold Frost's wrist again and bit his teeth. The more fierce fire poured into Cold Frost's body under Xiao Yang's control. Shilin Hinterland, inside the ice palace. Xiao Yang's palm, flushed by the cold ice, still held the Cold Frost's cold wrist tightly. Regardless of the latter's struggle, the strange fire in his body poured into the Cold Frost again and again, and was swallowed up by the strange cold ice again and again. Damn it! What the hell is going on? Several attempts failed. Xiao Yang couldn't help feeling anxious. Although the relationship between him and Lung Bingshuang was not good, the latter had saved his name anyway. Even though they had their own purposes, one yard returned to the other. Xiao Yang must help Lung Bingshuang solve this matter today. Old Bone, look, what's going on? Under all kinds of helplessness, Xiao Yang had to put all his expectations on Guyo. Hey, smelly boy, push this kind of thing on my old bone again. Guyo smiled and scolded, and then a wisp of soul power was separated. With Xiao Yang's arm, it was injected into the Cold Frost body. This just corresponds to that sentence. Under the absolute power, any resistance is useless. Just like at the moment, when this wisp of soul power of Jiuyu is injected into the Cold Frost body, Those originally fierce and powerful terrible cold air immediately retreated like a tide, completely without the fierce hegemony when facing the strange fire of Xiao Yang just now. Jiuyu's soul power was recovered after a week in the cold frost body. However, Jiuyu's next words made Xiao Yang's face become gloomy in an instant. The little girl's current situation, but some are not very optimistic. The voice of Jiuyu's words sounded quite heavy. From this point alone, Xiao Yang could already feel the seriousness of the situation. It's not easy to let Jiuyu say such words that are not optimistic. Old bone, what's the matter with her? Xiao Yang frowned. He couldn't sit back and watch this matter whether it was in love or in reason. Hey, do you remember why this girl wants to go back to Bodhisattva? Xiao Yang was slightly stunned, and immediately seemed to think of something. He raised his eyebrows and said in surprise. Is it the cold poison in her body? Yes, I'm afraid the girl was injured for a long time. In addition, this is a very cold place. The attack of cold poison is more and more serious. Up to now, she can't bear the power of cold poison and can only let it spread. Jiuyu explained to Xiao Yang in a dignified tone. When the latter heard the speech, the expression on his face could not help a change. Unexpectedly, the cold poison in the cold frost was more terrible than he expected. On weekdays, when cold frost appears in front of outsiders, it is a strong and domineering taste, which is frightening, but who knows what severe and unbearable pain she bears under her strong appearance. In order to protect the Shalin Mountains, the cold frost has endured a lot alone. With this in mind, Xiao Yang dared not hesitate anymore. As soon as his palm turned over, he quickly took out the back bodhisattva and wanted to feed it to Lung Bingshuang. Wait. At this time, Guyo suddenly made a noise to stop Xiao Yang. The cold poison in this girl's body has accumulated to an unimaginable level. I'm afraid it's difficult to completely eradicate it by relying on Hu Bodhisattva. You can't feed her now. What should I do? Hearing Jiuyu's words, Xiao Yang quickly took back his outstretched palm, frowned and hurriedly asked Jiuyu in his heart. Now the best way is to warm her body with different fire, wait until the cold poison is suppressed a little, and then return to Bodhisattva to completely eradicate the hidden danger for her. At the same time, Xiao Yang's head suddenly felt a rise, and a message poured into Xiao Yang's mind. The method given by Guyo is to inject different fire into the body of the cold frost from several places where the cold poison erosion is weak, so that the cold poison in the body can be removed for the latter in the shortest time. However, when Xiao Yang carefully sorted out the information in his mind, an old face could not help but become hot. In addition to the head, there are also the neck, the heart and lungs, and the lower abdomen where the cyclone is located. These places are not only the key to the role of the human body, but also the places with the most abundant energy. According to the principle, there is nothing wrong with the information given to him by Guyo. Its position, however, made Xiao Yang feel a little embarrassed. These positions are undoubtedly the most sensitive parts of a woman. Once touched, Xiao Yang can't imagine whether he will tear himself away in anger after the woman recovers. Mutter. With this in mind, Rao could not help feeling a burst of cold on his back, rolling his throat slightly and swallowing a mouthful of saliva. Jiu Lao. You didn't mean to frame me. The corners of his mouth twitched a few times, and Xiao Yang asked in his heart with a smile. Hey, you should be able to see from your level. Besides the places I gave you, what other methods do you think can save her? You have seen it before. With the power of cold poison, it is impossible for your strange fire to enter her body. If you take it by force, it will hurt her body. You don't want to hurt her and want to save her. The method I gave you is already the safest. If you don't want to, I have no choice. Jiuyu smiled and said something that Xiao Yang couldn't refute. Jiuyu said really well. The places he pointed out are indeed the weakest places in the cold frost at the moment. In addition, there is no other way for Xiao Yang to inject strange fire into her body. Alas. Don't blame me. With a helpless wry smile in her heart, Xiao Yang looked up at the woman in front of her. At that time, the cold frost was close to fainting. In this short time, the cold poison in her body really became more violent. Perhaps it was because she felt the threat of Xiao Yang from the outside world. Mutter. The throat rolled, Xiao Yang's palm trembled slightly and slowly lifted up, and slowly moved to the lower abdomen of the cold frost. When Xiao Yang was about to drop his hand, you saw the cold frost that was about to faint, but suddenly opened your eyes. A pair of cold eyes stared at Xiao Yang like a person. The cold killing intention was not concealed at all. The pale cheeks looked extremely cold. They couldn't help but pause, and a painful groan came out between Xiao's nose. Then, they said in a cold voice, "What do you want?" The sudden appearance of this scene also made Xiao Yang's palm whiz back. The whole body suddenly shook at this moment, and her steps couldn't help retreating 2 steps. In front of her, the woman suddenly acted like a reflection, which almost scared Xiao Yang's half-life. She took a deep breath with trembling breath. Xiao Yang whispered, "The cold poison in your body is getting heavier and heavier. Don't move. Let me help you expel the poison. Go away. I don't need you." At the moment when Xiao Yang's words fell, Leng Bingshuang was angry, but before her words fell, the world in front of him suddenly darkened and the whole person fainted immediately. On the ice bed, the delicate body of the cold frost lay flat on it, with her beautiful eyes closed and no breathing. At a glance, at this time, the body surface of the cold frost and the skin surface were actually covered with a layer of thin ice. The whole person looked like a beautiful work of art. If Xiao Yang hadn't been familiar with it for a long time, I'm afraid anyone would think it was really an ice sculpture. The thin ice layer covers the whole delicate body of cold frost. Even the body under the ice layer is suffused with an ice blue color, and even the flesh and bones under it can be seen faintly. Unfortunately, everything has been covered by the ice layer. At this time, the cold frost has completely become a piece of ice from the inside to the outside, as if it was broken at the first knock, which makes people dare not touch it easily. But it was at this time that a small piece of fiery red light appeared in the cold frost's body, in her lower abdomen and the upward part of her chest. The light was flickering and erratic, as if it were a real flame burning. It looked quite mysterious. This is the strange fire that Xiao Yang injected into the cold frost. Leng Bingshuang fainted, but Xiao Yang was still trembling and did not dare to be careless. While trying to inject strange fire into Leng Bingshuang, the cold sweat on his forehead was like rain. Xiao Yang was very careful about every move he made. He was afraid to wake up the woman again. If she misunderstood him at that time, that's really fatal. Due to the weak cold poison attack in these places, Xiao Yang's strange fire easily poured into it. However, because of Xiao Yang's tension, this procedure lasted for 2 hours, and the results were even more unsatisfactory. But fortunately, under the insistence of Xiao Yang for several hours, the cold frost's body was finally occupied by different fire. At the moment, the parts with red light in the body of cold frost are the places occupied by Xiao Yang's different fire. At the same time, these places are also the weakest places of cold poison erosion. However, Xiao Yang still spent a lot of effort in order to let his different fire enter the body of cold frost. Look back and see the cold frost at this time. At this time, in the body of cold frost, the 3 energies account for one side respectively, showing a balance of strength and giving way to each other. The most powerful of these 3 energies is undoubtedly the cold poison. The long-term accumulation makes the cold poison particularly powerful and terrible. Even the strong people in the chemical source environment such as cold frost fall in front of the cold poison. It can be imagined how terrible the cold poison is. As for the second force, it naturally belongs to the source gas of cold frost. As a strong source environment person, the fighting spirit in her body has been gradually transformed into source gas. When cold frost really becomes a strong source environment person, all the fighting spirit in her body will also be transformed into source gas. This is the rule of Yuanwu mainland and the only way for every strong source environment person. However, it is a pity that although today's cold frost strength has reached the source environment, it finally fell in front of this cold poison. As for the third force, naturally, it is Xiao Yang's strange fire. Among these 3 forces, Xiao Yang's strange fire is undoubtedly the weakest existence. The 3 forces, the first cold poison, can't even parry the source gas, and Xiao Yang's strange fire can't be the opponent of this huge source gas. Naturally, there is different fire, it is now the weakest of these 3 forces. Of course, Different fire can be divided into a tripartite trend with the former two, and naturally has its own advantages. In terms of location, Xiao Yang's strange fire occupies the most important organ positions in the cold frost body. It can be said that it affects the whole body. As long as Xiao Yang can protect these organs in the cold frost body, even if the cold poison is strong, it can't threaten the life of the cold frost. In addition, the existence of different fire is particularly threatening to those cold poisons. Different fire is the god of heaven and earth between heaven and earth. Even living people will be afraid of the power of different fire, not to mention the insidious poison entrenched in the human body. To deal with these cold poisons, strange fire is a natural enemy. With the formation of the three-legged potential, Xiao Yang can't be idle outside. Although the strange fire has been injected into the cold frost, because the cold poison is powerful, Xiao Yang can't stimulate the diffusion of the strange fire through the cold poison alone with the power of the soul. Therefore, for today's plan, Xiao Yang can only do it himself, through the skin on the body surface of the cold frost, so as to control the spread of different fire. In this process, Xiao Yang needs to reach every position where the different fire spreads. Where Xiao Yang's hand goes, the different fire spreads. Those cold poisons have already occupied all parts of the cold frost. As for the source gas in her body, although powerful, she can only stick to her origin and not be hurt. At first, when Xiao Yangang found this, the expression on an old face was particularly embarrassed. In this way, doesn't it mean that if he wants to drive away all the cold poison in his body for the cold frost, he must let his hands pass through every inch of her skin? This thought makes Xiao Yang's old face turn red. In addition, there is a deep sense of anxiety. I wonder if the woman will kill him because of these things when she wakes up. After all, before Lung Bingshuang faints, I saw Xiao Yang stretch his palm to her lower abdomen. This scene is for a person who is about to faint, especially for women. It's even more difficult to think about it. When Xiao Yang hesitated, the cold poison in Lung Bingshuang's body didn't wait at all. Those cold poisons were unwilling to show weakness to the strange fire that suddenly came in. The dark blue cold poison is like a thick fog in the cold frost, spreading in all directions. Where it passes, meridians, blood, bones and internal organs are quickly covered with a layer of ice. However, whenever these mists approach the different fire again, they will melt rapidly, send out a slight hissing sound in the cold frost body, and then disappear. However, although different fire is the natural killer of this cold poison, in the long run, those cold poisons that are constantly approaching different fire are also further approaching Xiao Yang's different fire. Under careful observation, those internal organs that originally recovered under the protection of Xiao Yang's different fire have a tendency to be covered by ice. The appearance of this scene made Xiao Yang's heart tighten. He knew that no matter how, he couldn't hesitate anymore. In the ice room, two figures, one black and one white, stood opposite each other. The man in black robe was a man with a red face, but his lips were strangely white, his breath was weak, and his mouth was breathing heavily. On the other side, the charming body wrapped under the long skirt is a world-renowned beauty, staring at the man in black with a cold face and a murderous face. The cold, frosty and white jade hand held it fiercely in the air. In an instant, a long ice-blue sword with 3 fingers wide fell into his hand. The blade pointed directly at the center of Xiao Yang's eyebrows. "Xiao Yang, what have you done to me?" At the thought of his untidy clothes when he woke up just now, the cold and frosty heart could not help but be mixed with shame and anger. The expression on a pretty face was green and white. The palm holding the long sword could not help trembling slightly. At the same time, the killing intention in his heart was crazy and violent. Hearing Lung Bingshuang's words, Xiao Yang, whose face turned white, was not surprised. He glanced at himself and didn't know when he had become an icy blue right palm, and quickly put it under his sleeve robe. Then he looked at the cold Bingshuang opposite, swallowed a mouthful of saliva hard, and the blood gas in his mouth made Xiao Yang's head feel dizzy. "If I said I did it to help you get rid of cold poison, do you believe it?" Xiao Yang shook his head and tried his best to offset the faint feeling in his mind. After a long time, he said weakly, "If you dare to argue after doing something, you will die." Hearing Xiao Yang's words, Lung Bingfeng's heart was more murderous. When he was awake, He also vaguely found out about some things that had happened before. Can he cure others' chest with his hand? A scornful scold in the mouth. Immediately, the cold frost wrist shook, the long sword in the hand waved, and the sword stabbed Xiao Yang's chest. In the twinkling of an eye, he saw that the long sword was about to stab into Xiao Yang's chest, and at this time, Xiao Yang, who was dizzy, suddenly felt a black in front of him, and the whole person immediately fell back, and happened to hide the sword stabbed in the face. However, Oreo was so. The sharp blade still easily broke Xiao Yang's black robe on his chest, leaving a deep wound on Xiao Yang's chest. The red blood immediately gushed out, but it was frozen in this ice chamber like an ice cave before it fell. At the next moment, Xiao Yang's body fell heavily on the ground in the ice chamber. The blood kept pouring out and frozen on the wound in front of Xiao Yang's chest. While sealing the wound, the cold of ice was pouring into Xiao Yang's body. Seeing this scene, Leng Bingshuang wanted to ignore it and leave directly and let it die under the cold, but then, just as she was about to cross Xiao Yang's left hand under her sleeve robe opened unconsciously. Then, a jade bottle rolled out and appeared in Leng Bingshuang's line of sight. The jade bottle slipped out, and the rich Dan Shantan time spread. Although across the jade bottle, the cold frost still felt the hot energy breath in the pill. This is. As soon as the cold frost's beautiful eyes coagulated, I couldn't help raising doubts in my heart. With a move, the jade bottle on the ground rose with the trend. It was collected in the palm of the cold frost. With a shock, the jade bottle immediately turned into powder. Then, a red pill gradually appeared in the eyes of the cold frost. The more intense smell of Dan fragrance came to my face. The cold frost just took a sip, and I immediately felt that the still rampant cold poison in my body retreated a little quickly. This is Hui Bodhisattva. There was a cry of surprise in his heart. The cold frost immediately swept to Xiao Yang, who had fainted beside his feet. A look of surprise flashed through his beautiful eyes. Unexpectedly, Xiao Yang really became Hu Bodhisattva, and the quality of this pill is absolutely not bad. This guy is really a terrible man. Even so, you have to pay for what you have done to the king. At first, he couldn't help but exclaim, and then, the look on Leng Bingshuang's pretty face suddenly became cold. As soon as his wrist turned, the tip of the long sword in his hand immediately turned down and stabbed it into Xiao Yang's chest. But the next moment, the action on Leng Bingshuang's hand stopped again. My Mao stared at Xiao Yang's white face, and then glanced at the long sword wound on his chest. The Hui Bodhisattva held in the other jade hand was received into the ring by the backhand. The cold frost my Mao closed tightly, the willow eyebrows almost twisted together, and she struggled repeatedly in her heart. Should this sword be stabbed or not? After struggling for a long time, the long sword in the jade hand fell fiercely, and when I saw that it was about to stab Xiao Yang's chest, it burst again, turned into a light, and was included in the ring by the cold frost. Even if you return this pill to me, you can use it to compensate for what happened just now. As for Bingling cold liquid, you can't get it again, Leng scolded. With a wave of Leng Bingshuang's big sleeve, an invisible force rolled up Xiao Yang's body and then fell heavily on the ice bed. Although the action seemed fierce, in fact, with Xiao Yang's physical strength, how could this impact hurt itself? Leng Bingshuang's move was just to vent his anger. After all this, Leng Bingshuang was too lazy to pay attention to Xiao Yang. Whether he was alive or dead, he paced and went out. Now that she has got the Hu Bodhisattva, she should make good preparations for swallowing the Hu Bodhisattva. In a twinkling of an eye, there was only Xiao Yang who was in a coma in the ice room. This scene was a little similar when Xiao Yang first stepped here, but the roles changed with each other. At this time, the right hand under Xiao Yang's sleeve robe was a piece of ice blue. In the palm, a particularly cold air was gradually spreading towards his arms along Xiao Yang's meridians. This cold air was the cold poison originally existing in the cold frost. For a long time, he dispelled the cold poison for the cold frost, so that inadvertently, part of the cold poison in the cold frost poured into Xiao Yang's body. Although the strange fire in Xiao Yang's body tried to resist, in order to expel the cold poison from the cold frost, Xiao Yang was exhausted. Not only did he consume most of his soul power, but there was little fighting chi left in his body. At the moment, The cold poison surged up, Xiao Yan was unconscious again, and he was unable to stop it at all. Alas, this smelly boy, stealing chickens can't erode rice. He also wants to throw Hui Bodhisattva out. Maybe he can wish you a marriage. Who knows the result? In the depths of Xiao Yang's soul, Jiyu sighed a little disappointed and noticed that those cold poisons in Xiao Yang's arms were gradually spreading and were ready to take action, but then he seemed to have found something and stopped. This video will end here.